While exploring nearby woods, a group of teenage boys in the quiet town of Worcestershire, England, stumbled upon a gruesome scene: the skeleton of an unknown woman stuffed into a tree. This woman became the talk of the town as investigators failed to identify who she was. Today, we begin our themed month with week 1 of Unsettling Forest Mysteries as we attempt to answer the chilling question, who put Bella in the Wych Elm? This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force members, to Red Web. I'm your host, Trevor Collins. With me is Alfredo Diaz. This is the show all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, the unsolved in general, cryptids, aliens, paranormal activity, all sorts of good stuff. Fredo, I hope you're buckled in because we have a bit of a theme month coming in this month.
Oh?
Yeah. Today, we're talking about the Wych Elm.
Yep.
We'll get all into that.
Yeah.
But I figured this is almost a test run for October, where we're going to have our own big theme month culminating in something cool for Halloween.
Yeah, appropriate.
This month, we're going to do creepy woods. Because what do we do with this show except take the normal, mundane things of life and make them eerie and unsettling?
Woods are scary without being scary.
Oh, yeah.
Because you could legit just walk into a national park and get lost.
Oh, yeah. You can get
and then
lost.
have to get rescued.
Right. We got the missing 411 cases we talked about.
Yeah.
That could happen any park.
It just very easily. So that's already all right.
Yeah.
That could just happen without anything supernatural or any mystery.
Predators.
Yeah.
That could happen.
Yes. True.
Cryptids. They're out there.
Yeah, well,
They're hanging around woods in general.
I wouldn't be lost looking up at the trees thinking maybe I'll find Bigfoot up there.
Right. That's not the first fear I've got in my mind, but it is a fear.
Possibility.
Fear. This month, we're going to cover Unsettling Forest because honestly, there are so many of them around the world. And there's only so many weeks in this month. We'll obviously come back to some more in the future, but we wanted to find some of the biggest ones from around the world. So let us know, Task Force, you are a global audience. So we want to know if anybody lives near any of these particular forests that we're going to talk about in this month. I'm very eager. Maybe at the end of the episode, I'll walk you through what episodes are coming next, which normally, I don't know, we're testing different things.
Yeah.
Normally we like to keep it a little mystery for you. That's the
figuring
local
things out,
mystery.
testing the fences a bunch of raptors.
We like to surprise you on a Monday with a mystery. Now you can just start penciling them in. Make this an appointment.
Things to look forward to.
Right. Stop by the Task Force HQ, pick up your buttons, your badge.
Your what?
Your sippy cup of knowledge.
Sippy cup? Yeah, wait, hold on. Rewind it back. Buttons?
Yeah, well, got to keep those shirts buttoned up tight. Lab coats got buttons on them.
I didn't understand buttons. I still don't understand.
I said buttons instead of pins, and you know what? I rolled with it.
Buttons, and then buttons on what? On shirts. Okay.
Appreciate you doubling down on it.
Just not even to anything. It's just a button on a shirt.
Look,
maybe that's our next product. It's a t-shirt with a button on it. Just a big button.
It's on brand. It's on brand.
All right, so let's dive into it. Let's talk about the Wych Elm. And if you're listening to this with your ears, as I hope you are, not listening with your eyes, you're going to notice that we're going to say Wych Elm a lot. It's W-Y-C-H elm. It's a type of tree. The Wych Elm is best known for its towering size. It's about 100 feet on average is what they kind of get up to. And Wych Elm is usually associated with death, or at least for many, many years it was associated with death due to how often it was used to make coffins. So it has a bit of a colorful history to it.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't. How would you feel about having a tree like that, in your backyard?
A Wych Elm?
Yeah.
Sounds sick. I'd be down for it.
Okay. You'd be like, that tree right there, that's what they use for coffins.
Yeah, that's my coffin tree. I'm growing my coffin out back. I always got a sight on the future, They said plan ahead, and I said, how far?
Just trying to cut out the middleman, make my own coffin.
All right, with all the goofs and buttons out of the way, let's dive into the mystery of who put Bella in the Wych Elm. All right, so I'm going to take you way back, wind that machine back to April 18th, 1943. A group of teenage boys were walking through Hagley Woods. Hagley is in a large village and civil parish of Worcestershire, England, on the boundary of the West Midlands. Now, very simply put, the West Midlands is a metropolitan county of central England. It contains a lot of beautiful cities: Birmingham, Coventry, Dudley, Sandwell, so on and so forth, many beautiful places. Parts of Dudley, Sandwell, and Birmingham actually lie in the historic county of Worcestershire, where this story takes place. So shout out to the English task force. So these boys were trespassing in the woods, which were on the grounds of Hagley Hall Estate, owned by Lord Cobham. Not really a person you want to wrong if they got a lord in front of their name. They got some sway.
Yeah. I wouldn't want Lord in my title. People would probably think you're like
Target.
They target you for your money or just hate you because they would just think you're like a douchebag.
True. I feel like all lords end up being disturbed ghosts as well, right? Wandering the halls of their own estates.
Damn.
So these boys are kicking it in the forest. They enter the forest with their dogs, hoping that they might be able to find eggs. This is actually what they're looking for in order to take back to their families, cook them up, make a meal.
Like
bird eggs.
So the dog is able to like, I mean, dogs can sniff anything, but like they're just, I guess, go up to a tree and start looking up and sniffing.
It's a good question. I don't know. The dogs don't really come into the picture much beyond this, but
yeah,
comfort animal, smell things out, protection, you know.
It's just a random question. I'm like, what? They sniff for eggs? Okay.
Yeah. Button sniffers. Now, along their way, one of the boys, actually Bob Farmer specifically, spotted a wych elm, and he said, you know what? That's a tall tree. I think I'm going to climb it. So he climbs it up. At the top of the tree, he was able to then notice that the tree was hollow. He could look down the center of the trunk into the bottom of the tree. And when he looked down there, he saw what looked like a white object. And of course, in the hunt for bird eggs, he's like, great, I've found an egg. Well, when he pulls this egg out of the tree, he finds himself face to face with a human skull. The skull was described as having human hair stuck into it, crooked teeth that hung out of the skull's mouth. And of course, the boy was super scared, put the skull back where he found it, and all the boys ran out of the woods. At that point, the boys made a pact that they would keep the skull a secret, because if they told anyone what they saw, they would get in trouble for simply trespassing on the estate. While this seemed like an easy secret to keep, at the time, 17-year-old Tom Willits felt uneasy about what they found. Of course, anyone in their right mind would.
There's always one that cracks.
There's always one bad egg.
Yeah.
But, he was feeling uneasy about what they found, couldn't help himself, told his parents. Sounds like he's got a good relationship with his parents. But of course, the parents were like, well, that's disturbing. We have to call the police immediately. The police immediately go to the site where they found the wych elm, and they looked around themselves upon realizing how tightly jammed into the trunk the skeleton was. The tree had to be cut down in order for the police to further access the remains inside of the tree. And then, once they did cut it down within the hollow tree, the police not only found the skull that the boys found, but then they found the rest of the entire skeleton of a woman minus the hand.
So there's a lot to unpack here.
Lots to unpack.
I will say, like, I can very much envision this because, like, when I was younger, we would do a little trespassing ourselves, but there was like an abandoned hospital.
I'll take that as a confession. Write that down, Christian.
Yep, go ahead.
Got it.
Add it to the list.
Put that right under which countries wych elms are native in.
But there was an abandoned hospital, so we would just like,
ooh, that's got to be eerie.
Yeah. We would just like, and the path was like, deep in the woods.
You went there?
Look,
deep in the woods in an abandoned hospital,
I
bro?
didn't want to go, but of course I'm like,
was there a cute girl in the group that you're trying to schmooze
there
up?
was a group of us, and maybe there was a cute girl.
We got our answers.
but I was like, there's maybe like 6 of us, so I feel like I can look, young Alfredo in my house, like I can outrun everyone here. So that being,
Fair
which
enough.
is not smart because it was like pitch dark, like the path to get there.
Yeah.
And it was just like gravel and, trees and shrubs, all that kind of stuff. So I would probably bust my butt out there. But we did. And so like, while you were saying this in my mind, like, Jesus, like what would it be if we saw like a body there?
Yeah.
Right. That's like,
what would you do? What do you think your group would do?
Honestly, a group, we would report it for sure.
Right.
I don't think we would be like, oh, we're addressed by it. I think, we would report it. Honestly, maybe when I was younger, I'd freak out more. But as of right now, if I was to come across that, I'd be like, whoa, that's gnarly. With like all respect, I'd be like, this is like a crazy situation here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The body's dead. Right. Now, depending on like the level of decay.
Right.
Like if it was just
big question.
Right. That's a huge question. Like they found mostly skeleton, like still pieces of hair and maybe some skin or whatnot, and that is like, oh, that's gross. But if you're talking about like a body that is mostly flesh, or even then it's just like, oh, that's a person that like is in between, like, are they sleeping and like, oh my goodness, like I think they're dead. Like that's terrifying.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like that to me, yeah, it scared me.
If it was recent activity,
Yeah.
you don't
Right.
know what's up. You don't know why it's like ended
Exactly.
this way.
Is the person still in the vicinity?
Right.
Like, am I gonna get caught? Am I gonna be?
Was it the owls? I mean, these are
We
all
don't
obvious
know.
questions.
Check the eyes. And then they go for the eyes. So while you're saying this, like in my head, I'm like, wow, like.
So we're taking you back,
yeah, I
to
was
a
like-
personal experience,
Right.
That's
Where I'm just like,
crazy.
if I found something during that moment, like
Yeah.
that would be terrifying.
Yeah.
Or could be, depending on, like, honestly, weirdly enough, depending on the condition of the body. Now, they found in the tree.
Yep.
Like
Tightly packed in there to the point where they had to cut it down.
So was there like a hole like on the side of the tree, or was it all the way did he climb all the way to the top and look? Because you say he looked down.
Yeah, he looked down and saw the top of the head from there. This story is always, that part has always confused me personally. Every
Right.
time I read or like talk about this, I always misunderstand if there was a separate hole at the bottom. But either way, this woman was fully encased and trapped in this witch elm. Whether there was a smaller hole
Right.
down below
Yeah,
or
yeah.
not. I believe the way that this body was understood to be there was top down.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting.
I don't, Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is now an assumption, but
Mm-hmm.
based on the further details after researching it, I believe that there is not a hole down below.
I believe so, yeah. My
Yeah.
interpretation is that, like you said, it's from top down.
No one
Yeah.
actually, honestly strange that you say this. No one really clarifies that in anything that I've like heard
Yeah.
or read about. I'm sure some people do, of course, but it's not a prevalent
Right.
detail. oddly
Yeah,
enough.
but just me, I like to visualize things. So I'm
course.
like, was he climbing up, and as he was climbing up, there was a hole in the side of the tree, or did he go all the way towards like the top of the tree and then look down?
Yeah. Now, I don't think this was a 100-foot tree that he climbed up. It's
Yeah.
just that's where they can get to. But yeah, he found a decaying, essentially long trunk, looked down, and there it was. So the police hacked this thing down to get inside. They found the skeleton, obviously minus that hand. And along with the skeleton, which still had some fabric remnants from her clothing wrapped around her bones, police also found a gold ring, some blue shoes. Excuse me, I believe it was one blue shoe, perhaps two. One was being worn at least. And they believed that these items also belonged to the skeleton. Around the tree, police found bones that eventually they figured out constituted one's hand, and this could be the missing hand. And so the authorities believe that the bones of the hand must have been disturbed by wildlife in some way, just given that they were scattered around. A piece of taffeta fabric, I believe I'm pronouncing that properly, I hope I am. This fabric was found inside the mouth, possibly indicating that this woman had suffocated or been suffocated. A medical examiner named James Webster looked at this skeleton and was able to determine that the woman died in roughly October of 1941 at roughly 35 years old. That's the best estimate. Otherwise, there was a range also given with this, and that range was anywhere between 25 and 40 years old. So a pretty good guess based on all the things considered. An interesting fact was that she was 5 feet tall, which not sure about the 1940s, but is not a super common height for a fully grown woman. Also, another interesting detail that makes this individual distinct was her protruding teeth, which you could, I'm going to get into it, but you could talk to a dentist to try to look up records for these unique features around this person. Additionally, there was also light brown hair, and the medical examiner was also able to determine that she had given birth to at least one child. And based on the way the skeleton was lodged in the tree, Webster was sure that this was the result of a murder rather than an accident or a suicide, though there were no signs of violence at this site. He believes that the woman was killed, at least in the immediate area, and then placed in the tree. If she had been killed somewhere else, it would have taken a lot of effort and time to take this body to this location, and Webster thought it would also be very unlikely that they would have time to take a corpse and put it down the tree before rigor mortis set in. Rigor mortis, of course, being the stiffening of the joints and the muscles that make the body very rigid a few hours after death, and that usually lasts from 1 to 4 days.
Man, I'm baffled. Like, even back then, they were able to pinpoint so many fine little details. Like, after just, only having access to the body. Granted, like, you have access to the body, the whole body, but like, looking at the body, studying it, and be like, okay, here are the facts. Here's a bunch of details, etc.
Yeah.
But the whole rigor mortis thing is like actually pretty important because, yeah, I mean, you can't really stuff a body down there. So it had to be recent. The thing that you said that kind of like, I don't know, maybe like put a pin in it was the fact there was a gold ring. They didn't take the gold ring. So it doesn't seem like, granted, they could have more different valuables on them that was more important, and maybe there was time crunch, but to me, it just off the rip. Like I'm not thinking like, oh, this was a robbery,
right?
Because there's the gold
something
ring
deeper
still there,
here.
right? Yeah, there's probably something deeper. I'm curious to see like how they were murdered, or if we even know like how, right?
Yeah.
Were there like scratch marks on the bone indicating like a stabbing or anything like that?
Well, we'll dive into the theories as much as we can, but it's really hard because despite really narrowing the search based on these details, there's not much else to go on. And we'll expand around that search here in a bit. But in an effort, like I said, to identify this skeleton, Worcestershire police contacted local dentists to see if any of them could possibly recognize these unique protruding teeth. They also compared the skull's teeth with those of missing persons reports and subsequently found no answers. On April 24th of 1943, the Hartlepool Northern Daily Mail published a probable description of this individual, so that way it could be blasted out to the public, and the public could then help kind of group think this search a little bit, with this to say, quote, her age is given as between 25 and 40, most probably 35. Height, 5 feet, with light brown hair and dressed in dark blue and mustard-colored striped cardigan and mustard-colored skirt. Blue crepe-soled shoes, size 5.5. All the garments were described as poor quality, and a wedding ring found among the bones was of rolled gold. So they posted this. They also had a drawing of what this person could have looked like with their clothes. Fredo, I'll let you take a look at that drawing. But as always, @RedWebPod is our Twitter handle and our YouTube handle if you want to go find the visual assets for yourself. But essentially, it's just a hand-drawn version of what I described. Yeah,
I mean, it's hand-drawn. There's really no, like, I mean, there's not even a nose on it. There's no detail in the eyes or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, they don't know who it is or what their, like, features are really. But, I mean, yeah, there's nothing here. It's mostly, when you look at this, it's mostly just like a building block for the information that goes around it.
Right. It just looks like that could be a standard woman of this time period. You know, you might have help with the hair length, because if you look at the hair that was on the skeleton, you go from that. But otherwise, a standard drawing.
Not that I would ever commit a crime or like a murder, but you've got to think that the person that did do this, like, grabs a newspaper, this is being blasted everywhere. You gotta be sweating a bit.
Oh yeah, if you did this,
and like, oh, they found the body.
Right.
Like
a little stressed out, but also if you did it and you find that everyone's going, who did this? You might then start to go, oh, maybe I'm free. Maybe they don't know.
I think after a little bit, it would settle in, like, maybe I'm free. But every single day, I'd be like, are they gonna stomp on my front door today?
Oh yeah. So police then began investigating the items that they found surrounding the tree, but still found themselves at a dead end. Of course, this is unsolved mystery, so we're going to find a lot of dead ends. But in 1943, it's worth remembering that this was the height of World War II, which quickly took precedence over the mysterious woman being found in this tree, and subsequently the case kind of went cold for a little bit. The police found no answers and had bigger concerns with the war, so they parked this case for quite some time. And it wouldn't be until nearly 6 months later, if not longer actually, that other evidence, not even evidence, that something else happened around the town. Talk had died down of the tree skeleton. Leads went cold. Really, this whole thing got forgotten until 1944, around Christmas time, when a mysterious graffiti was spotted on an abandoned building. It was found in West Midland, written in block letters and in white chalk, and it said, quote, "Who put Lubella down the Wych Elm?" This is the first time a name had been mentioned with regards to the body. So a lot of people, when finding out about this graffiti, immediately go, that must be the person that did it, or must be someone that knows about this case because they named this unidentified person. I will say it's worth mentioning that we don't know if this is the name or a name. if someone just kind of made one up.
Right. They were like,
Or-
I'm going to label this missing person case myself.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a handful to unpack there.
Let's start unpacking.
Well, I mean, if I just keep putting myself in this situation. This episode.
Yeah. I like that.
I mean, if I was to like write a question, I'd do block letters. That'd be the first thing I go to.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you can't like
all caps, block letters.
Yep, all
Trace
caps.
this one.
Right, exactly. You won't know, and then like, well, that corner bottom left curve, we got you. And like, what? So that's insane. I didn't even think about like, in my mind, instantly, I was like, oh, this is someone that knows the person. But it could have, it could have very well been someone labeling the body. Which in that case, I'm just like, I don't know if that does more harm.
Right. It's misinformation,
Right?
regardless of intent or not.
I guess it does like bring up this whole like missing person case. But like, but I feel like it kind of takes the case and spirals it in a weird direction.
Right.
Like, who wrote this? Is this the person? Like, is that their name? So I don't know if that's like helpful or not.
Yeah, it is really tough because, again, regardless of intent, it creates a very twisty potential cold trail, right?
Yeah.
So now the police have to track down who did this, why did they do it, many months later, why now, and why with the name, and was this just a prank or what? So anyway, let's talk more about this graffiti.
Well, the thing too is if you don't know the person, I'd be just curious as to why is it so important for you, like for it to be brought back up again,
right?
Or if you did know the person, why be anonymous?
Yeah, right. Why not go to the police and say something?
Yeah. Either way, it's quite confusing to be right in the middle.
Yeah,
yeah. So.
Especially like, listen, I get it. I wouldn't want anyone disrespected either. I wouldn't want a missing person or a body found to be kind of neglected. But if World War II is raging, when the war to end all wars was meant to be the final one, and now you're in the throes of a second world war, let's step back a little bit. Let's not start going, hey, police, what about that body though?
Right.
Like, we got a lot to really pay attention to. So it's definitely an interesting move. So sometime later, it is worth mentioning that another piece of graffiti message was found on a building in Birmingham. This time it said something slightly different. Quote, who put Bella in Wych Elm, Hagley Wood? In the same area, more writings were found with variations of the original question. This is the same forest and the same type of tree that the unidentified body was found in. Of course, it's pointing exactly to this case because they specified in yet another message, Hagley Wood, to really center it in. Though various messages had variations in them, it appears that it's the same person due to the chalk being present on both writings and the handwriting being very similar.
Okay, perfect. I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
I was like, what is the writing match up?
So police focused on the missing persons cases with people named Bella because, right, that's another angle.
Right.
It's more details.
You
We're gonna
instantly
focus in.
go down that lane.
And then they asked the public for information on anybody that's missing a Bella. Any missing Bella, please share your information. The discovery and persistence of this graffiti gave new life to the case and a name to investigate. Though none of the Bellas that popped up because of this search and because of this graffiti matched the description of the woman found in the Wych Elm, it kind of created more questions, but ultimately it's unknown how many and how often the message appeared or when, if ever, the original writer stopped. Basically, all I'm trying to say is graffiti started popping up everywhere. It might have been one writer at a moment, but suddenly it spiraled out of control, and a lot of Bellas came forward, but none of them ultimately matched the 5-foot, crooked, protruding teeth, light brown hair kind of description that the skeleton had. In fact, it wasn't until the 1970s, a few decades later, that the most famous iteration of the message was found, and it was found on the Hagley/Witchbury obelisk in the same area that the body was discovered. And this time it said, in the same words but with a different spelling, quote, who put Bella in the Wych Elm? Again, you're listening with your ears, not your eyes, and witch this time is spelled W-I-T-C-H, as in the magic being, rather than a type of tree. So this is really what starts to give it a new feel and starts to bring in theories and ideation around witchcraft and, misdeeds around that sort of thing.
Right. Does someone think that this person was a witch casting spells or like trying to sway them, their minds, something like that, and it was terrified and then killed them because of that.
A historic excuse for violence, essentially.
Yep.
So, since the 1970s, the Hagley Obelisk and other buildings in the area have been repeatedly written on with this message, essentially just like a viral trend in this area now for this to pop up in white chalk. The message in the Hagley Obelisk remains there to this day. Here's a picture of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's just as eerie as one might imagine. Just slowly drawn all cap letters,
right?
Very skinny in chalks, like a haunted child.
Well, at least
up there.
You shouldn't be vandalizing, but at least they're writing in chalk.
Right. Spritz that off.
Easy.
Gone.
Water. Gone.
Now, in 2018, British anthropologist and facial reconstruction expert Caroline Wilkinson recreated Bella's features by using photos taken from the crime scene in order to visualize what that face would look like. We actually do have, for you, Fredo, a visualization of that face. One of my favorite techniques of modern science is that people can do this. I don't know how accurate it is.
Right.
I would love to see people take a skull and do this to someone who's living, but
the coloring and the lighting makes it look very spooky.
It's definitely creepy. A little AI generated.
This is a person's face. I'd be like, oh, this is a photo of someone. Man, that's crazy. Yeah, the teeth are very, like the two front teeth on
they're
the
overlapping.
upper layer are, they're like overlapping.
They're crooked, and that was like
very crooked.
Yeah, so. It was one of like the key descriptors of this person.
Yeah, so like you would know this person. Honestly, they would leave a mark in your memory bank.
Right. It's a unique face.
Yeah.
Now, I love this type of experiment. I've always just wondered about the accuracy, right? I've seen it used on mummies in ancient Egypt and how they bring people's faces to life. And I think it's the dopest thing I've ever, to bring the dead back.
It's so cool.
To visualize. It really puts your mind back in time. And that's one of my favorite things about history, but I digress. Either way, they got the major, the macro level descriptors right. They got the face shape and the mouth and the hair and everything. Now, one of the things that always frustrates me about these unsolved cases is when things get lost. And
it's one of those.
And it's worse than that too, because it was the actual skull. She wasn't able to use anything but photos of this stuff back a few decades, or many decades at this point ago, because the skull itself was lost and the police don't know what happened to it.
It's a human skull.
It's a human skull.
In a missing persons case.
Right.
How do you lose? What?
Yeah.
What I don't understand is because this has happened, valuable stuff like this and these mysteries has happened. Not that we would be able to find out, but I would love to know that the statistic of where along the chain that happens.
Well, we have a decent idea.
Oh.
We don't know who, but we have a location in the chain, right?
Okay.
So the police obviously are on scene. The body goes for an autopsy. And Professor Webster then, after the autopsy, gave the remains to a fellow professor. Somewhere in that particular time period, Bella's skeleton went missing from the medical school. You don't know if it's a college prank. You don't know if it's a mix-up of evidence. But it makes you wonder, was the skeleton destroyed, or is it now somewhere obvious, right? That it's right in front of people, hidden in plain sight, that people just don't know that could be that.
That's interesting. Is it on display at a medical university or something like that, where people can study, or at a museum, or just got mixed with another skull,
just a regular body donated for science?
That never crossed my mind. Or it could have been for, I don't know, this study or something like that, and then I don't know what the process is, and may possibly unfortunately discard it after that, or store it away somewhere. But it could be. You think that the teeth would kind of keep that
oh, wait a minute, hold on.
This skull, one has this skull has the crooked teeth,
right?
So
that someone's going to connect those dots.
Yeah.
Guess not. At least not until, some maybe question mark in the future. But
it very well could be. There's got to be one skull out there was this is the skull of a certain king during the 1950s. And really, it's nah, it's some skull from...
Wait a minute, that's Bella!
Right.
I've seen those teeth!
Right. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like,
I never even thought about
it
that.
makes me wonder, like, what would you do with a skull?
I
would you do with a skull?
don't know.
Man, that's frustrating. I hope I don't get lost. Or maybe I do. I don't know. Maybe I want my body actively doing something.
Right. I
Rather
mean, if
than
your
just
body
laying
just
there.
so happened to be on display
Yeah.
and it was like, this is
Look at my bones.
Yeah. This is the skull of, like, I don't know, the inventor of
Yeah.
Google. And you're like, nah, not really. It's
I'd
just
just
me.
I'd just be a ghost kicking it around there in the science exhibit. I'm like, yeah, look at my bones. Those are good bones.
Those are good bones.
I drank my milk.
Really good bones. Good looking cheekbones.
Look at those cheekbones. But yeah, no one ultimately knows exactly sure when this went missing, nor has anyone been able to recover the missing evidence. And I think, yes, that impacts what Caroline Wilkinson was doing with recreating her features in a photograph. But worst of all, now in modern medicine, in modern science and forensics, it makes it impossible to do, well, not impossible, but because of this, they were unable to do modern DNA testing on it. My question is then, where are the other bones at?
Yeah, could you use the other bones?
Yeah. I mean, I'm
don't-
sure they want the hair that was on the...
Yeah, the hair would work really well.
Well, let me ask you a question.
The thing is, though, like,
Mhm.
there's hair. Oh, man, I guess depending on how it decayed, there'd only be hair on the skull.
Yeah.
Like, not
And it's
hair
also described
anywhere
commonly as
else.
hair stuck into it,
Oh.
which is weird. Like, I don't know
How
exactly
would
what
it
that
be
means, but
stuck
everyone says
into
that.
There's no blunt force trauma that, like,
Yeah.
smashed, like, the scalp into the...
Maybe it was just stuck to it or something. Like
yeah,
the
I mean,
skin
look,
decayed
yeah,
and
he
the-
probably
and
just
the hair
decayed
remained.
and got stuck to it with the
Blech.
sun or something. Oh,
thinking of the
it's just-
Crypt Keeper now,
Yeah.
and that's just
dude,
freaking me out.
That guy freaked me out.
But that's what bums me out the most, is not being able to do a DNA analysis. You won't be able to find living relatives or anybody that matches us in some sort of way. That's resolved so many cases.
Yeah, and like back then, I don't think there was like an extensive like dental record archive somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nowadays, yeah, I mean everything's logged digitally, but
Well, one thing, I'm going off my memory banks now because I don't have this in my notes, but one thing I do remember, and you studied some dentistry back in college, so I have a question for
Once
you if
upon
you
a time.
know. But it looked as though, looking at the skull, police were like, it seemed that a tooth had been pulled relatively recently in the person's living life. And so they thought that that little dental activity would at least be in the recent files of local dentists. And so trying to corroborate all this information did seem like a very smart play. And there's some theories that attempt to address why in the local area this person wasn't popping up.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean like even back then there was some sort of like system to like archive dental records. I mean, granted,
Even if
it
you're
was-
just like, I pulled this person's canine, right?
Right.
Like,
I mean, there's still ledgers and logs, stuff like that, because it's a continuous
right.
thing, right? Like even back then they had to log what they were doing. So that way they knew like where this person's teeth were at, the history of it,
Yep.
etc. Like with any like medical
Mhm.
thing. But
So
like,
you're like, oh, what's this thing? Oh, I see you had work on that teeth.
but honestly, that's like it. I mean, we already talked about how that's like the path that they chase down the most. But I mean, it
Mhm.
makes sense. Like you can learn a lot from just like dental records alone. The kind of like it narrows down. Like, did you have like, I mean,
It could narrow
granted,
down diet
not
even.
back then, but like even today, like, was there amalgam used in their teeth for
Yep.
fillings? Is there
Mhm.
porcelain? Like, was there things like Invisalign used? Right, like anything could help at all.
Oh, yeah.
Right, we're just like, okay, like we're narrowing it down, and this was very specific dental work. Like
Mhm.
it could help.
One of my favorite things is when they're archaeologists or paleontologists or anything are analyzing teeth from extinct creatures or just whatever they find.
Mhm.
And they go, well, based on the ridges on the back of these teeth, we think this, or based on how these teeth were worn down, we think their diet was high in fiber or something like that. Like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff blows my mind. Do you think?
I mean, like you could even, like any type of difference or any type of decay or destruction to the tooth enamel and like even like the outer protective layer, the dentin,
Mhm.
all that's logged. Like, granted, who knows how extensive was the logging was back then, but even like nowadays, like if you had a cavity in a certain area, that's logged.
Yeah.
And that's nowadays they take the dental records and they're just like, okay, well there was a cavity here and there, and so let's send that out. Like they'll literally like log, like take a look at the teeth, log all the different like areas and like work and word like any type of decay or any issues with the dentin, all that kind of stuff, and they'll send that out to like local dentists, like, hey, does this match anything? Like, you guys got records, you guys got X-rays, like it can be pretty extensive. Like, it's just cool, like small little details. Yeah,
your teeth are essentially the fingerprint of the face.
Right? Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, kind of going back to your education, and maybe this is kind of out of your wheelhouse because it is more orthodontic oriented. But the question I have is, if her teeth were crooked and protruding in certain unique ways, would it be possible that, okay, I guess going back, the skeleton's probably entirely lost, not just the skull, but focusing in on the skull, that this could have been used for orthodontic studies in the 40s or 50s or whatever? Like, is that something you can do on a skull? Because the teeth are very rigid at that point. You need living tissue to manipulate teeth over time. Or is there anything like with regards to orthodontistry that could have been used? And maybe that's why it went missing, because someone was like, that's a perfect skull for my class.
Honestly, like back then, I could see that happening. Nowadays, we have 3D models and there's all kinds of just digital models and everything like that. Or it's just like, they'll check boxes and be like, okay, and then teeth shift around different ways. And then also there's little like some models that we like would practice on. In a couple of years I did study. I mean, back then they didn't have that, right? So you would think, you'd either look at a living person's teeth, or to some extent, like, why wouldn't they study someone that passed away, right? Maybe you could have been like, okay, this is just like someone that passed away, and you can use that for science. And then didn't just mean that the science was like, the body, doctor, it could have been a dentist or doctor too, but like could have been a dentist as well. Like, I gotta defend the
like
dentists
that
out
subtle
there.
accidental shade, which is like, okay, they're doctors too.
Well, they are. Just a lot of people don't refer them.
No, they
to them
are
as
for
doctors,
sure.
but they totally are.
My uncle was my dentist. And well, I don't really. He's not in the same state anymore, so he isn't. But was he was my dentist. He's
so
a doctor.
like they didn't have access. I mean, I'm sure they had kind of like models and everything like that. But why wouldn't they study actual teeth? Even if it was,
it's like, this is a rare opportunity.
I would bet they would, even to see like what the decay looked like, what it would look like, different, like the teeth, different stages after life, stuff like that. So
yeah, that's interesting, man. I guess like
different lifetime. I studied for a couple years.
Yeah,
and I worked as a dental assistant for a couple years too. That was fun.
What was the worst thing you had to do? Gotta get in there and drill. You more clean and like analyze.
Like, I like sterilizing like the tools. I like laying the tools down because I like working my hands.
You sterilize them with a lighter.
I think the worst
thing, you had a back alley dentistry sort of thing.
Yeah,
you just
come on out.
You take the pokers and you just go. Blow it off. You're like, it's good. Can't see no germs. I'm not a doctor yet.
Oh yeah. You kidding me? I just use mouthwash. It's mouthwash.
It says it gets rid of 99%.
Right. I think the worst thing was just like when it comes to like going to a doctor. Everyone hates going to a doctor, but you go, I gotta go.
Right.
When it comes to dental stuff, a lot of people just go, we all do it. Something happens with your mouth. They're like, it's a pain. Maybe there's a little pressure or whatever. You're just like, it goes away and you go, whatever. Which is the worst thing because it just festers and it gets worse.
Right.
Or it starts breaking down, all the way to the nerve system of your tooth. But like,
then it dies. It goes painless.
It's very interesting, like drilling down to the nerves and seeing the different strands. Like, and then if it's inflamed, it's like a little pillow. It's awesome.
Pillow, no.
But like, it was. I think the worst thing, aside from like bad breath and it happens, but
halitosis.
It's just the fact that like people are just like I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Right. When you had a doctor just like, I don't want to be here, but I need to do this.
Yeah.
And, like no one's coming in and it's just like, everyone's like, I don't want to be here. It's a waste of my time. Why? The cool stuff though is like, we were drilling to into a tooth once and it just completely fractured.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh. Just popped
and
open.
then just blood just squirted up on like all of my chest and stuff like that. And I was like, we're getting in here.
I think I might have nicked something. Oh, we got a live one.
And I don't know. It was fun. I totally still to this day would go back to doing that. Yeah.
There's something satisfying, I think, about taking, whether it be inanimate objects or someone's oral hygiene and taking it from like where it is to like
right,
cleaning it up, getting it all nice and sorted, and then sending them off. I think there's something cool about that.
Yeah, to
but
see all the dirt and stuff like that and like break it down, get it out. Yeah.
I feel like dentists face a lot of mistrust. There's a lot of trust issues with dentists over a lot of other doctors, I've noticed.
No, I agree.
And that's because you can get away with a lot.
You can.
Like shallow false fillings and all sorts of misdeeds.
And we knew someone that went through that. Also in dental school, they did say that, like, dentists have a high suicide rating. It's just how it is. No one likes dentists, and like it kind of just gets to people, and for various reasons, it's up there. But yeah, I enjoyed when I did do it.
Yeah. Well, hello there, Task Force. This is Trevor. As always, get to talk right to you. And let me just air this one out. Worcestershire. What's going on, England, with the pronunciation? You had me twisting and toiling on that one. But hey, I hope I pronounced it right. But anyway, this is my chance to give you some housekeeping notes on what's going on in the Red Web Task Force Society. This is my pamphlet giving hour where I get to speak to you with, anyway, you get the drill. But let's talk about it. So Red Web right now has a baby hands pin that came out on August 1st. This one kind of snuck up on us, so we didn't get to talk about it too much leading into this. But hey, I believe that this is going to be the beginning of something special. I want to do like a pin per month. I want to do a pin of the month club. So if you guys are interested, you guys really came out for the cryptids pin and the task force pins and everything. Those are going to be released on the first Monday of every month. We'll remind you here on the podcast, but the first Monday of every month. But if nothing else, we at least have that baby hands pin. So if you missed out on the plush, you can get that pin and still represent those tiny, tiny hands. On that note, I do want to also say a little peek behind the business curtain. While the baby hands plush is completely sold out, I want you all to go to that website at store.roosterteeth.com, search up baby hands. And if you want one, there is still a way for us to reorder those. We just need to know that you're out there and hungry for some baby hands. So sign up for the restock email notification. So that way we know how many of you are out there waiting for a restock on baby hands. That's the number one. In fact, it's the only way to let us know that you want to bring back out of stock items, because you guys have been so phenomenal over the many years of just emptying out our stock when it comes to the jackets, the posters, all the shirts we've had, and now with the baby hands. Thank you all so much. But yes, always use that function, and I'll continue to remind you that it exists, because when we hit a certain threshold behind the scenes with those email signups, I can go to the people and say, yes, please order more, and we can get that whole ball rolling. But anyway, that's a little peek. Thank you all so much for supporting the baby hands. We've got a lot of other products in the works. It does take some time when you have a custom product, but we're just a little tease. We're talking about maybe a squonk plushie, perhaps. We're talking about a little sippy cup of knowledge action happening. But anyway, you can keep up to date at store.roosterteeth.com. And that's a good way to support the show. Another good way, you guys have been, thank you. I don't know. I don't know how to say thank you enough, but another good way is reviewing us on Spotify, Apple, and everything. Right now, we're sitting at 7,100 reviews with a 4.9 average. That is phenomenal. And I can't put you in the spotlight enough, because that is the very reason we were recently on the front page of the Apple Podcasts whole platform. When you went to Apple Podcasts, boom, Red Web Task Force, we were right there. And that's all because you guys support us, you listen to us every week, and you review us with your time. So anyway, I just wanted to say, just like last week, a thank you very much. And with that said, I want to talk about today's fantastic sponsor. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by BetterHelp. How we care for our minds affects how we experience life, so it's important to invest time and care into keeping them healthy. There are plenty of ways to support a healthy brain, like learning a new language or taking power naps, my personal favorite, but there's also BetterHelp Online Therapy. BetterHelp is online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat-only therapy sessions, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you're not interested in that. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and to make it nice and easy for you, you could be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. Task Force members, you can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/redweb. That's betterhelp.com/redweb. And with that said, let's dive right back into the mystery. All right, let's move on now to the theories.
Ooh.
Let's start exploring, because as with many cases, I feel like this thing only opens up a little wider when you start to dive into the theories, because more information comes forward or more things start to pile on, whether they're related or not.
Yeah, all the nuggets that you withhold from me
well,
finally come into the light.
Sometimes they're only relevant because the theory All right, so let's talk about the first theory, Bella the spy and the moss-ups. Let's talk about this. So journalist Wilfred Byford Jones received an anonymous letter in 1953 going by the alias Anna. So this is 10 years, give or take a few months, after the body was found. This letter says, quote, "Finish your articles regarding the Wych Elm crime by all means. They are interesting to the readers, but you'll never solve the mystery. One person who could give the answers is now beyond the jurisdiction of earthly courts. Much as I hate having to use a nom de plume, I think you would appreciate it if you knew me. The only clues that I can give you are that the person responsible for the crime died insane in 1942, and the victim was Dutch and alive illegally in England about 1941. I have no wish to recall any more. Anna from Claverley."
First off, earthly courts. What is this, like Lord of the Rings?
Basically saying, yeah, right, like maybe,
wait,
hold on.
They really spiced it up.
Hold on, let me do it.
So you see the phone.
The personal Google's coming
I'm
out.
diving in.
Yeah, the personal Google.
Yeah, hold on. I mean, we are in the hiatus. We're in the heights of Tolkienism, right? He's in his he's in his 40s or 50s around this time, and so maybe the language is billowing out of them. I don't know. People old timey, they talk all fancy,
right? Yeah, it's the first thing in my mind.
Why say much word when few words do trick? The more advanced we get as a species, the more caveman we speak.
On that.
I got too impatient even for half words.
I know.
We got the idea.
Too slow.
The idea came across.
Word,
I got
small, trick. It's like the way I Google. All right, you just throw out a few keywords. And it's good.
Maybe it'll autofill. But like,
you're right.
It just sounded spicy. But yeah, I mean, back then they
Instead
did
of saying they're dead,
fancier. But just like something about like earthly court, where I was like, that to me, I was like, that's not like talks back then. That feels like you're spicing it up.
It does feel spiced up, but let me give you a counter example or counter thought. Instead of saying, I'm imagining this person is writing stream of consciousness, so they say this person is beyond your earthly judgments. They are instead in the heavens, right? They are being judged by their deeds in the great beyond, whatever your religion might say.
There you go. You grounded it for me. That makes sense.
And then, but they did throw out some French. Nom de plume.
Nom de plume.
What does that mean exactly? Is that like the name of the dead? Or like, I hate to name the dead.
No plums?
A pen name.
A pen name.
That's very important to land on, because Anna, as we will find out, is not this woman's actual name.
Yeah, it's just, yep.
So they admit that this is kind of like a pen name.
That's a lot of info.
A lot of info.
Like, that's a ton.
We're going to dive way down into it too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see if there's anything that kind of like brings weight or truth to this.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot.
It's a lot. It's probably one of our bigger theories. So let's dive into this. Anna sent more letters where she claimed that this Bella character was involved with an informant for the Nazi spy ring, working to determine the location of local munitions factories, which could then be targeted by the German army. After a little digging, police found that Anna was actually a woman named Una Mossop. This is where the name Mossops come in at the title of the theory. So Una accused her own husband, Jack Mossop, of killing Bella. This is why she knew more details about Jack and why she kind of spoke maybe vaguely about him, but also in a more glorious way, right? There's a personal connection there. So Jack Mossop, worked in an ammunition factory in Coventry. He was good friends with a Dutchman named Van Ralt, and this Van Ralt character was a Nazi contact working as a middleman, selling Jack's information on the arms factory he worked at to a spy ring in the Midlands. So a lot to unpack there.
Wow, okay.
But based on all of this, again, this seems to be word of mouth, but Jack did factually work at an ammunition factory, but it does put her potentially at the center of a very strong claim based on what she's saying. So Anna claims that Bella was working alongside Van Ralt and that she came with him to England from the Netherlands. This would then explain why Bella wasn't filed as a missing persons in this area, why there were no dental records coming up, why none of the local missing Bellas lined up with this supposed Bella, because she wasn't from here.
Right, yeah.
Another letter actually from Una blamed the death of Bella on a drunken mistake, saying this, quote, March or April 1941, said he had been to the Littleton Arms with Van Ralt and the Dutch Peace, i.e. Bella. And she had gotten awkward, belligerently drunk, essentially, and then passed out. They went to a wood and stuck her in a hollow tree. Van Ralt said she would come to her senses the following morning. End quote. Basically saying that they all were working together. Things went down. She got drunk. They stuck her in a tree. And then the Nazi informant's like, nah, don't worry. She'll wake up in the morning and be right as rain.
Look, my friends get drunk,
Down a
pass
tree.
out. Well, you don't stick them down a tree.
Right. It's like, my question is, was there information that she was feeling guilty about knowing? Was she starting to become like a loose lips sort of situation? Like, oh my God, she's going to slip the deets to the police.
Right.
Like, is
also,
there...
also like the like all of that, but just like the process of like, if you stick them down a tree and go, they'll learn their lesson. At what point do you come back and check on them?
Right.
Because
they'll wake up and be fine.
Right. They'll learn their lesson is more so like, okay, you want to see the outcome of that. You know what I mean? You want to see the lesson learned, or you want to see that, you want to see the lesson learned and like, awesome, they're on a better path. Or like, you want to see a lesson learned in the sense of like, you want to see them suffer. Or you want to see like, you want that satisfaction of like,
there's no follow-up.
No, there isn't.
Well, that we know of.
True.
Van Ralt could come back.
They could have came
kicked
back
up
and
there.
been like, it is what it is. Goodbye.
He looks down there and he goes, there's that fuzzy egg. I'm going to leave that to some boys in 10 years. 3 years, 2 years. I digress. It fits the story thus far, though, in a very interesting way. So supposedly this Bella character was stuck in the tree while unconscious. And then when she woke up, she was unable to climb out, obviously, because she was found there and then unfortunately passed away. Now, it stands to reason why then Jack was committed and considered insane, because Jack felt extreme, excruciating guilt following this incident, right? Leaving an unguarded, unconscious woman in a tree somewhere on someone's estate. And he was then admitted to a mental hospital about a year later. Jack then died before Bella's body was able to be found, and Van Ralt was never found, so they could not be questioned by police, neither of them. Jack Mossop supposedly had recurring nightmares about Bella's skull being stuffed inside that tree, and that, along with his guilt, is what led to his mental breakdown and his admission to the mental hospital. Ultimately, his coroner's report suggested he may have been suffering from chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy is a progressive brain condition that's thought to be caused by repeated blows to the head and repeated episodes of concussion. It's why football players need to be very careful once they've taken one too many hits to their helmet area. But we don't know anything further about what could have been repeatedly hitting them over their head. Una hasn't really spoken to that, and so we don't know if it was a physical blow to the head that caused this sort of situation, or if it was this crime or some conflation therein. But either way, police actually dismissed Una's claims as there was no evidence to back up her story, and police were offering reward money to anybody with further information on Bella. So it's possible that Una made up this story in hopes of making money off of it. But if Jack Mossop really went through all of this, I think the main hang-up is the coroner's report and the trauma to his brain and it missing an association to the rest of the story. She might just be using the truth to build a fantastic narrative.
I think where this falls apart for me is if he had so much guilt to the point where he went insane, I just don't understand like why she was left there then. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because
or why not say anything?
Right. Because the narrative there is that like she's alive, shoved into a tree. It wasn't an accidental murder or anything like that. So at that point, like, why wouldn't you get help? Why wouldn't you say anything? Like it does that. Like that jump is a little bit too far of a jump for me to be able to like make that narrative have any sense to me. Because I just don't understand. Like, granted, maybe he just left her there and then it was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I went through with that type of situation. But it's just so weird to like, I went insane because I killed this person, but like you never went back. You could have just fixed that in so many different ways. Yeah,
all things considered, the motive is there for Una to kind of build that white lie on a kind of history of, insanity with her husband or whatever, and kind of just like throw him under the bus to maybe make the buck post-mortem. That lack of connection to whatever minimal evidence does exist does call the whole story into question, but it's an interesting lead nonetheless to have explored.
Right, no, completely.
So that is where that particular theory dies off. But following the dismissal of Una's story and that theory, German Gestapo Josef Jacobs brought new information to the table. Just real quick, a Gestapo, if you haven't heard of that kind of title or that nomenclature, it's essentially a secret police organization employing underhanded or terroristic methods against persons suspected of disloyalty. Not usually a term of endearment, not really a group of individuals you want to be associated with.
Yeah.
So Jacobs was captured and arrested after breaking his ankle while parachuting into Cambridgeshire in 1941. Police found a photo of the German actress and cabaret singer Clara Bauerle in his pocket. So now we have basically someone who's parachuting illegally into the country, arrested. Who's this photo? When questioned about that photo and why he had it with him, Jacobs said that Bauerle and him were actually lovers, and she had been recruited as a spy by the Nazi regime. Bauerle also parachuted into the West Midlands in 1941 and then disappeared. So he's basically building a case that Clara Bauerle is actually the Bella that we're talking about, which is interesting. The names aren't the same, but similar.
Yeah.
So she parachuted in with him and then disappeared. This story led some to believe that this Clara Bauerle might be the woman that Una had originally been writing about, that Jack Mossop had killed. That she was an informant for the Nazi party to find out where these munitions. So again,
we're adding two people, and then that is also connecting to the first theory.
That's one of the things that happens with these theories, is that they build on each other, and so they feel discreet, but then they borrow from each other. So a possibility here that this is the woman that Una was referring to. Either way, Bauerle was born in 1906, which would have made her 35 years old at the time of the death.
Oh, wow.
If the body was hers, and that's what the coroner at the time, the medical individual was saying,
how did she get into the country then?
Parachuted in.
Parachuting. Oh, okay.
Like a spy, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure that being an actress, a German actress, would have helped her meld in to the regular populace, maybe affect an English accent, be able to procure a job, be able to start to cozy up to people working at munitions plants, such as Jack Mossop. So it's interesting. News articles also reported that Bauerle had a sudden end to her career in 1941. It's boom, on the money.
Oh man,
there are literally news articles about this person and her career ending the same year that she supposedly jumped into Cambridgeshire as a spy.
Just went missing.
Or just sudden end of career. That no one really followed up on her being missing, but instead just, I guess her career's ended and she's gone behind the scenes.
I retired, goodbye.
So this theory was debunked by the fact that when people looked into it, Bauerle was around 5'10". So a solid 10 inches taller.
That's a good amount.
Yeah. Than the 5-foot Bella. But up until this point, it felt very, very rich with detail, very possible.
It felt pretty on point.
And then in 2016, it was discovered that Clara Bauerle actually died in a Berlin hospital in December of 1942, further proving that she was not the mysterious Bella found in the Wych Elm. But of course, as is normal for Red Web, we're going to discuss all the details.
Right.
We're going to discuss all the theories that have once been active and are now dead or are still active. And this one has thankfully come to a close. We have a little bit more understanding
It's still
now.
nice to get the understanding, because that right there it was tying together pretty nicely.
Oh yeah.
And then it very quickly exited nicely as well. Where it's no, this, and this.
It's nice.
I mean, 10 inches, that's a huge height
10 inches
difference.
is different.
If it's a couple inches, I go, maybe, I don't know. Is there any shrinkage with decomposition, decomposing? I don't know. But 10 inches,
I'd also be curious if
come
this,
on, that's a lot.
Right. I'd also be curious if this actress had the same kind of teeth, right?
That's the thing too. You would totally know the teeth.
Yeah. I recognize that smile anywhere. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to discuss a theory because for many years, right, this was pretty thoroughly thought to be the answer.
That's actually I would think that wouldn't be. Why was that thought to be the answer for so long? Because then you can just tell the teeth match up.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. Certainly the height. Do we know when the theory was debunked by the height Christian? That's one piece that I'm curious about. But everything else lines up so interestingly that it's
it does.
but that your mind is so eager for the answer wants to just believe it. But there are still so many other questions not answered.
But I feel like also this was an actress, so you would just tell the teeth, boom, right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. For this to even
Have made it beyond
right, the teeth would have had to
Right.
match up similarly.
Suddenly somebody's like shuffling a bunch of papers. I gotta look into this, officer. And like, hold on, let's see the smile. This isn't the one.
Right, done.
Boom.
And for this to be like a theory that like I
Mhm.
want to know if everyone's like this is the main theory. Like,
Right.
what was your answer for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a mystery in itself.
I also feel like if she was well enough known as an actress, the height thing would have popped out too. But hey,
Right.
everything becomes clearer in hindsight. I'm sure
True,
once this
true.
mystery, if it ever becomes solved, it will become clearer in hindsight.
Yeah.
It could be very simple,
It looks as if in 1941 there were interrogation reports where people were talking about Clara's height.
Okay. All right. So most people were right on the money, and it wasn't. I misspoke. It was not strongly believed for years, but rather questioned immediately.
Yeah. Perfect.
My bad.
Strike the record. They did their due diligence.
Yeah. So those are two, depending on how you feel about them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, solid theories because there's a story there. But when you look a little deeper, that's when it quickly falls apart. Such is a theory. Moving on to a little bit more of a fantastical one. This one's literally about witchcraft. And if you know anything about witchcraft, whether it be the Salem witch trials or all of the stuff that went down across the pond in Europe, it has a very problematic history centered around fear of the unknown and also a lot of prejudice regarding women.
Yeah.
Let's just say like it is.
Yep.
And so that, part of that will play into what went down here. So with that said, let's dive into this theory around witchcraft because Hagley Woods had an ancient history of the very same thing, witchcraft. Local journalist Donald McCormick wrote in 1968 about the covens in the area saying this, quote, "There was an ancient tradition that the spirit of a dead witch could be imprisoned in the hollow of a tree and thus preventing from wreaking any more harm in the world." Of course, we know now with great hindsight and scientific understanding that all of this is very, very silly.
Yep.
But it doesn't stop people of the time from believing these sort of things.
Oh man, like is it the killer put her body in there believing that
Mhm.
or they were just inspired.
Right.
Oh,
Either way, not great.
right, not great at all.
So Professor Margaret Murray, an anthropologist at University College London, suggested that the Wych Elm murder might simply be the result of witchcraft since the name Bella raised concerns. Belladonna is a type of poisonous plant associated with dark magic. Some sources claim that the tree Bella was found in was actually witch hazel, still spelled witch, W-Y-C-H, but witch hazel, a tree that is often mistaken for a wych elm, and the names are sometimes used interchangeably, in fact. Wych elm has associations with witchcraft as well, and that's why sometimes they get conflated. Witches who committed crimes, I will put that kind of in very heavy quotation marks, were supposedly imprisoned inside trees like wych elms, which were commonly associated with dark magic, again, because of the idea that it would withhold their kind of
Yeah, their I don't know essence.
their essence, their power,
Any of
whatever
it,
might
yeah.
follow them from the great beyond. And there is apparently a ritual ceremony in witchcraft known as the Hand of Glory.
I was about to say, is there something with the hands?
Right, because that hand was missing. Good point. In this ceremony, the person being sacrificed is hanged, has their hand cut off, and burned from a candle made of the fat from their own hand.
What?
Wild. I don't know how anyone even comes up with
Wild.
this sort of stuff.
How do you even
It's like a Mad
just
Libs of
making
terrible
stuff
things.
up?
Right. So
That's
the hand
insane.
The hand that was located 13 paces from the tree, right, and then in various pieces, was an ancient custom used in the execution of a witch. So it could answer as to why the hand was found in pieces around the tree and was able to be gotten to by wildlife, whereas the body might not have been.
See, I think, I don't know. I don't know anything about anything, but like,
Except
you would-
teeth.
yeah, I got you on that. You would think that we would know the answer to that piece
Mhm.
because if they cut their hands, you'd probably see some scratch marks on the
Mhm.
bones.
It's a very good point.
So at that point you go, okay, this kind of leans towards that theory, but if there wasn't, like how, right? Like then yeah, it was just not like, I don't know, nature,
Right.
right? Animals
Yeah.
wild animals that just like picked away and like took the hand.
Yeah.
Because
Jeez.
I wouldn't think that they would be so precise as to not leave any type of markings on the bone. But I feel like that you find that out, then you can kind of figure out whether or not this was like a
Right.
witch thing.
I mean, when it comes to Murray himself, the professor that I was referring to, Margaret Murray, she's pretty convinced that this person was in fact a victim of a ritual held by an inexperienced occultist. And to your point, it would stand to reason, especially if they were inexperienced, but either way, that the wrist area, if they could at least find the hand portions of the bone, or at least if they looked at the skeleton and looked at the kind of furthest most down point of the wrist, that some sort of markings would be visible. That's what really bums me so much out about missing that skeleton, is we can't in retrospect go and look at that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
But man, if it doesn't fit this occultist kind of ritual.
Yeah. Well, as soon as that you said the hands were like scattered, I was like, why? And then you say, well, maybe it was like wildlife. I'm like, good point.
Right. But it was definitely good of you to kind of pin that and bring it back. Because I almost forgot about it. Because I got so in the throes of this weird theory that I'm like, wait a minute.
Instantly, I was like, that's weird.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
And is there anything else to that?
Gut check
and then it wasn't. And then you gave me that nugget at the end.
So Murray's theory was popular in local newspapers and eventually led police to the murder of someone else. The murder of Charles Walton, whose body was found nearby, pierced with a pitchfork. But the theory was soon after dismissed by police. That's a whole other kind of murder I'm not going to dive into, and I actually don't know about, I'll admit. But Christian, was Charles Walton in the similar area? Is that what they mean by nearby? And was that also a victim of this potential ritual? Is that how they were able to kind of dive in on this, or like?
Why are people going like, this is the spot?
Right. They're like, I'm going to go haunt that Lord's manor.
Yeah. Also, like, if you're the Lord of this manor, you've got to be like, come on, just stop killing people on my property.
Right.
Jesus.
Deforest that stuff.
Like, get rid of it.
Right.
So, like, people are using it in the most terrible ways.
Right.
What a weird thing to deal with.
What would you turn if you had to deforest it for the sake of stopping this? Stopping these rituals, stopping these crimes, stopping these hidings. What would you do productively with that wood? Make them all into something
farmland, or
a little fence posts. Or what's something nice you can make out of it?
I mean, farmland, or maybe like
bunch of crosses,
apple trees.
Just trying to turn the energy around a little bit.
I just had all these. You just kept.
Caught me off guard.
I feel like I was
making into a couple whistles.
I had a hand on the steering wheel, and I was driving down this path.
I put your hands on the steering wheel. I was like,
right,
go ahead and drive us for a little bit. Hold on, though.
And then he's like, hey, you want to go down this path? Sure, why not? Just kept yanking it like hard right.
God, I forgot what I was doing. Oh my goodness.
You even derailed Christian.
So talking about Charles Walton, I admit I don't know much about that. The name rings a bell, certainly with the pitchfork situation, but
yeah, looking at Charles Walton, so he was murdered in February 1945, and he was found in a field close to a village that is about 40-ish miles from Hagley.
Okay.
Oh, so not that close.
Not that close, but
it seems as if just the circumstances surrounding the murder, I'm still trying to look at more, are reminiscent to Bella.
Okay.
And so
was this the gentleman that was in a chimney?
No, he was in a field.
Okay. Oh, you did say that. I'm sorry. There is another kind of murder mystery kind of thing with a body in a chimney, but that's a story for another day. But anyway, this theory was soon dismissed by police, interestingly enough, though I gotta admit, as much as it has a problematic history, there were victims to this problematic history.
Yeah.
And we could be looking right at one because it really fits the occultist ritual that Professor Margaret Murray kind of outlined.
Which is unfortunate because they examined the remains.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, you just take a look at it. Those were the times. These are unfortunate events that happened during these times. I think that's one of the things you just look at.
Absolutely.
Where the hand sawed off. Let me see if there's any like scratch marks, chippings of the bone.
Right.
Man.
Yeah.
Just one other quick thing about Walton. So as we said, he was found kind of stabbed pinned to the ground by a pitchfork.
Ugh.
And apparently, staking someone to the ground is a traditional way of killing a witch and making sure that their powers drain away into the earth.
All right, let me just spell this one out.
Jesus.
For whatever witch hunters are out there, Hansel and Gretel, okay? There's no witches kicking it. Not in the way that you're after them, I should say, with full respect to actual witchcraft and
also, has anyone proven any of this to like?
But also, what I really want to dive in after is these supposed rituals and traditions. They seem all over the place, and they just seem like good excuses to go attack someone.
Yep.
Cut it out.
You know what?
Put down your pitchfork and get back to work.
You know what it sounds like?
What does it sound like?
It sounds like someone who suspected another person of being a witch, stabbed them in that way, and then went, this is their soul goes back to the earth.
Right.
That's
not only did I have motive,
right.
It was okay motive, and it was with good reason.
It very much feels like they just made it up along the way.
That's my excuse, officer.
That's why I stabbed them into the ground, because that way their essence and soul will go back into the earth to protect us.
So, with witchcraft slightly behind us now, let's talk about some of the smaller local theories, because there are a few kind of urban folklore kind of pieces that might help kind of solve this, or at least some of the stories that tumble around the local villages and whatnot. So, there used to be a prostitute in the area who worked Hagley Road back in the late 30s, actually named Bella. Bella disappeared in 1941, the same year James Webster, the previously mentioned medical examiner, presumed Wych Elm Bella had died. So it lines up with the disappearance. Now, in addition to disappearing in 1941, the same year that the Wych Elm Bella supposedly died, Hagley Village locals claimed that Romani people used to camp out in Hagley Woods during 1941. So to expand upon their story and to at least create an answer out of this story, some of those people theorized that perhaps she was camping with the Romani people, or that Bella was killed by the Romani people and then subsequently ended up in the tree.
Interesting. So there were people that are camped out around that area? Which is weird, because it's like private property. But then also because of her business practices, that's why she was with these strangers. Potentially, yeah.
So that's one local story. Another one's even shorter, that Bella was a local barmaid who had been killed by a foreign military member. Some suspecting this person could have also been the father of her child, the person that the medical expert James Webster said she had one, right? And then a third local story says that Bella was actually a homeless woman that had no loved ones in order to report her missing. There's no answer as to why she went missing, how she was killed, but only that the woman in the tree was a homeless person and had no records and no loved ones to report her. And that's why we have an unsolved mystery.
Yeah.
Some other less local theories, but are still kind of small, I've heard, are that because this area was definitely wrought with action in World War II. One of the theories I've heard about is that there were air raids going on in the area, and that during one of these sirens or during one of these raids or what have you, in a desperate attempt to seek shelter, why ever she was there, whoever she was, this person got in this tree because it was the only form of...
Interesting theory.
Yeah, that she climbed in and then was unable to escape. Again, it's a much shorter theory, but it is something I've read about.
Oh, man. I feel like you'd line that up by, was there an air raid that year? Well, depending on the range, right? Like,
right.
Predicted to be 35 if you want to get accurate, but the range was like 25 to 40. So, I mean, 15-year gap, there could have been a ton of air raids.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the question in the end is, who put Bella in the Wych Elm?
Yeah.
Who wrote these messages? Are these messages just viral attempts to continue to keep the story alive? Was this person a victim of ritualistic sacrifice or other dark, sinister means? Of course, if it was anything in the realm of murder, it's dark, right? That goes without saying.
Yep.
Or was it some sort of accident? It's a very interesting predicament for an accident, but really the closer you look at this case, the more questions arise. And it's still a very, very fascinating case, which keeps the English countryside and the world interested to this day.
There's a couple of theories where I could just scratch off the list for me, but there's still so many. I go, that could work.
Yeah. What stands out to you still?
Well, the second theory, I just don't think works for me. is it Jack going mad and everything like that?
Right. Yeah. That Jack Mossop,
right.
working at a munitions factory, was then suddenly working with a couple of folks from the Netherlands who were spies.
Right.
And that went south.
And the whole witch ritual stuff, like I can see that lining up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think there's a couple things I'm like, that doesn't quite work for me. But then there's also a handful where I just go, ooh, yeah, that could be it, or that could be it. Like, I mean, it's a mystery for a reason. A lot of the local stuff, though, I feel like it's just gossip. But maybe that's just because there's nothing else tied to them. You know, we had a couple of these theories that were pretty rich in detail.
Right.
And then there's like, here's like a couple of one-liners. So to me, I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, that's just locals, you know, just gossiping.
Right. I mean, they're rich in detail, but weak in answers, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it is just gossip, though, for the local. We'd be remiss to not talk about them. But yeah, I think it's just locals who are much more intimately aware of these details, that something that sinister happened in their backyard. And they, whatever they can to resolve that. I mean, human nature is very interesting. And when something dark, especially unknown, happens, it is natural to want to figure out whatever it was.
Right.
And your brain kind of goes through some jumps in logic just to resolve it and to become okay with it so you can move on. But yeah, with that said, this is the top of the month. Happy August, everybody.
Woo.
We're starting our Unsettling Forest month. And with that, we're going to continue next week on the English countryside. So, hey, task force members over in England, we're not letting you up light. We're going hard on the forests of England.
Rendlesham Forests.
If you have any stories from these destinations, please let us know. If you've been to these places, let us know proactively. Would love to hear from it. But otherwise, we got tons of other
assault on their forest.
Oh yeah.
I think like this month is going to be interesting. I know nothing about it, but it can go so many ways. We have a murder mystery, but I mean, you could go with like spirits, you can go cryptids.
We're talking about
all
forests.
Kinds of weird stuff that could be going down
be a lot.
in the forest, and cults, rituals. Like who knows? I don't. I'll tell you that much. You guys do, but we'll see what happens.
Oh yeah, we're gonna cover the spread for sure. Christian, what other forests we have later this month? Do we have the Black Forest? What else we got?
Let's see. We have Rendlesham. We have the Black Forest, and then we have the, I don't know how to pronounce it, the Tunguska incident.
We got some good ones.
Damn. Okay.
And you're right, they do range. Not all of them. They're not all the same stuff.
I knew it.
So anyway, Fredo, I'll see you right back here next week for another mystery in the woods.